Sabrina Jackson Gandy, how are you?
I am marvelous.
Marvelous.
Yes, I'm
So,
glad to be able to say.
Sabrina, we are leading a series that's called Getting Better Together. Right? It's part of this living powerfully experience, the work that I've been doing that you do as a transformational coach as well. How excited are you that we get to show up in community with the level of true consistency, bringing people in to an opportunity to truly change their lives? How exciting!
Well, it was wonderful to be there in the room last week as one of the panelists and see how eager, hungry, excited, inspired everybody was, how forthcoming everybody was. Everyone in the room didn't know each other. And we also had people joining virtually, but it was just beautiful to see how we are at that point where we are now ready to stop so much of the individualism and I must do this alone and I must do this by myself, to realize there are others that are in a very similar place and space and are ready to get better together. So it's a beautiful spot to be in, and it's a great thing to see happening.
Yes, I just wanted to say thank you for showing up in such a authentic way. I mean, each person they were so honest, they were so open. People were willing to just lay it all out on the table, and I think that's really one of the big keys, right? We're going to be talking today about the next level, right? The questions we asked last week, I'm going to have Nathan pull them up real quick, but we asked 4 questions last week. You just talked about that. You just gave us a little bit of the why, right? We know we're able to optimize the experience. You're 500% more likely to complete any task when you do it in community, right? That's why colleges have gone to cohorts. It's because you do it in a way that allows you to thrive with others.
Yes.
And this concept of, we talked about getting stuck, and why do people get stuck in achieving their goals? And what I love about it, we talked about old habits and these limiting beliefs. Why is it so important? What are some of those reasons that people get stuck? And I love that we started talking about, it's important to tell the truth. And that's really one of the things we're going to go deeper on today. But what were some of the things that stuck with you the most as we talked about the questions from last week? Why do people get stuck, and how do you move beyond getting stuck?
Well, I just love the diversity of the panelists that you had, for one, because it was kind of like talking about an elephant, and each of us had a different perspective of the elephant that we were sharing about. But all together, we had this whole elephant conversation, so to speak. And there are so many wonderful directions you can come from when you are doing this kind of, wealthier, happier kind of work that you're doing. There's spiritual, there's psychological, there's transformational, there's mental, and we got to hit it from all angles. So I really enjoyed hearing all the perspectives. Like, it gave a whole 360, because some people, coming through the spiritual door is the door that resonates most with them. Some coming through the healing door, the emotional door, the mental door. So regardless of what door you need to come through, it's available through this series. So I think that's one of the things that I enjoyed the most hearing and being a part of, and also how forthcoming the audience was, to share and be forthcoming, because that's a new muscle, right? That's a new muscle, to bring your voice forward when there are other ears that are going to be hearing you, not just you talking back to yourself. So I love the better together, the community collective piece. So powerful.
I love it. We did have people say, we talked about why is it so important for us to tell the truth, to share our stories in community. And we had people actually talk about, how healing it was to just say it, hear someone else share it, and to realize that they're not alone. So when you think about being empowered, someone tells their story, they talk about the healing that they were able to experience, or that they are in the process of experiencing, and then really being able to move forward to say, this is what I did. This is how I'm empowering myself. That in itself is empowering. But we also have people say, I wasn't about to say anything.
Yeah.
Right. Like when the cameras went off, we were in here for an hour afterwards, still talking. And so today we're going to make it a little shorter in the room, online rather, so that people in the room feel like they have some time to explore and to talk even deeper. But yeah, you had a lot of valuable confirmations that it is so much better when we do this together. And the scientific side for me was like, it's guaranteed to work if we work it, and people were willing to do the work, right? It's not just, going to be easy. It's work. We got to do the work. Talk about that. Talk about doing the work.
Well, two things. One is going back to your first question, is the beauty of doing something like this collectively is we have a chance to see that the human experience has only so many varying stories. Like, we think we're the only ones that have experienced something. And then we hear someone else share about a core similar denominator. And so it has you feel connected to other people. It has you realize that your experience is not as unique and not understood by anyone else as you may think. And that other people have had it in their lives in different ways, of course, because our lives are not cookie cutters. But the human experience has these recurring themes that show up in each of our lives. And you can miss that if you are not doing work collectively, like in this particular case. Then the second part, the other question you asked me, would you state that one again? I wanted to be sure to speak to that. You asked me a second question. Would you say that one again for me?
So I don't even know what I asked. Sabrina, this is intentional and organic. I'm just making this up. I don't recall what I asked.
I think, did you ask me about truth?
Oh, maybe.
I'm not sure. I'm so sorry. I wanted to talk about that, the human journey piece, and how doing it together is really powerful. You really do feel connected and realize you are not alone. Neither are your experiences.
I love it. So I am going to ask you about truth next, but the concept of this being a journey, I think that is another piece of this. We set aside 6 weeks and people were like, what? And I'm like, it's 6 weeks because typically the living powerfully experience that I do with positive intelligence, and we're not going very deep with positive intelligence. I'm bringing in the nuggets and we're bringing in so much more. Like you said, I want it to be a full 360 experience where people, no matter how you're approaching this experience of getting better, of getting healthier, of getting happier, getting wealthier, or getting wiser, I wanted you to have, like you said, different perspectives. But the fact that this is a journey, that people are here realizing that it does take work. It takes work for us to do I think it was the work. The second part of this was the work, like getting the work done and doing it in a, it's like a journey. It's an experience, and we're helping to guide people, but it is a shared experience. It is a healing circle. It is an empowerment circle.
Yeah, well, it takes energy, it takes effort, it takes perseverance, it takes commitment, because it's very easy to get entangled in the busyness and the doing of daily life, or our businesses or our jobs. And so when you now invest in self, that's intentional work, where you aren't just living in your life, but you are now working on up-leveling, elevating, and supporting yourself and showing up more powerfully in that life. And it is a very intentional process, and it's not overnight. And especially if you're new to doing intentional self-development work that levels you up and elevates you, then you know that it is not overnight. It is not a shot in the arm, that it is a journey. It's a process. It has steps. It has levels. So it requires patience. I think of the gardening process. You have a pack of seeds, and on the front of the pack, it shows the finished product. It shows the carrot, not just the seed of the carrot, right? It shows the sunflower, not just the seed of the sunflower. So between having the seed in your hand and then the finished product, it is a process and a time lapse where certain things need to occur. And same thing as we grow humans, as we grow people, as we help people live more powerfully, there are steps. It's a process. And so, hey, 6 weeks really is quite short, right? I often do 12-month cohort programs, and we really just start scratching the surface. Women really start getting it like around month 9. So I think this is great that it's a 6 week. It really almost could be, 6 months, and we still not get to all the richness
Yes.
involved with, being happier, healthier, wealthier, wiser. Wow. So
All the things. I love it. Now, I love the language that you use. You talked about leveling up. And when we wrote out this, documented what this series was going to be called, because of, there's so many variations of this, and we've created something unique and new, right? So it's the Getting Better Together. Getting is a gerund for anyone who's English, from an English literature perspective. It is a action word. It is in the process of. So it's not get better. It's getting. It's like it's not. There's no destination, because we're all constantly leveling up. So getting better together is kind of the theme, right? And it's the living powerfully experience, because that is something that we can all do. And when we say getting better together, we say getting healthier, getting happier, getting wealthier, and getting wiser. That doesn't mean you're not healthy or wealthy or wise. It doesn't mean, it means what is the next level?
yeah,
Of wherever you are, what is that next level?
yeah,
What can you do to get to the next level? So why is it important that we talk about leveling up, wealthier, healthier, happier, and wiser? That's a journey that we're going to be continuing to get better. Talk about that.
I'll go back to my gardening analogy. My mom is a master gardener. And if you have a plant that is in the ground, you expect it to keep growing. If you come back week after week and it's still 2 inches high, you think to yourself, something is missing, something is wrong, because this is a plant and what it does is grow. It is the same for us humans. We are designed to be leveling up. There are levels to the human experience. And if we are not growing, then the human being, just like a plant, isn't fulfilling on its design. So we have a natural desire and inclination to want to be leveling up. And when that's not happening in the various ways that it can, in the many ways it can, we actually can feel discontent. We can feel restless. We can have an experience of feeling unfulfilled. So we are engineered to have the ability and equipped, even more importantly, we're equipped to be continually up leveling. And that's part of what, this series is about. And I love how we're breaking it down. Well, what does it take to up level? What are the tools to up level? Why does it matter to do it collectively? So all the pieces of the full meal are provided.
Yes. Love it. I love it. So we're going to talk about, this is week 2, session 2. And so there's going to be 4 questions that kind of build on what we talked about last week. And the questions are, and I'm getting people ready. So we're going to be live at 6. People might be like, wait a minute, this thing was supposed to be happening at 6 o'clock. It is, I promise. Join us at 6 o'clock. These are going to be the questions. We got a panel of people, a room of people. We expect you to be a part of this as well. So we're going to be talking today about, why is it important to level up, this getting better? Why is it important to focus on getting better, getting healthier, happier, wealthier, and wiser? And then what does it take to level up? That's going to be a question. A bit about last week was really this idea of truth telling. Why is it so important that we really focus on truth telling when we're trying to get better and to level up? The third question is going to be, why is it important to use tools like the saboteur assessment, which Nathan's going to put the link into the chat here if you're watching this, so you'll be ready for this evening. But there's something called the saboteur assessment. It's one of many assessments. There are many tools you can use, but this idea of telling the truth, right, is really important. And then third, what are the steps? What are some of the next steps? What are the things that we can do to turn this information, right? You're going to do this assessment. You're going to learn some stuff about yourself. We really just remind yourself of some things that you probably already know, right? Some of the things that might be holding you back, and how you can truly intercept those saboteurs that might be holding you back and move to the next level. So we're going to talk about that. And then we're going to really focus on that information, turning information into activation. That's what I love. So Debrina, real quick, I'm going to bring you back to this concept of truth telling. We talked a little bit about this last week. Why is that such an important part of getting better or becoming unstuck and getting rid of those limiting beliefs? Why is truth telling so important to ourselves, not just to other people, but being honest and truthful with ourselves?
Well, yeah, truth telling starts with self and it ripples outward. One of the things that we often don't realize about truth is that it has a frequency. Vibrations are measured in frequencies, and there's a whole scale of frequencies in the human experience.
Yes.
And the higher the frequency, the higher the vibration. And we are designed to be operating and holding a certain level of vibration in our bodies. And that represents health. And that represents a positive self-concept, et cetera, et cetera. So truth actually has a frequency. And if we use a reference of scripture, it says the truth shall make you free. So operating in that frequency with ourselves, with others, it makes new things become possible and available to us. So at the very basic level, truthfulness can be starting with the mirror in the hand. Because if I have spinach in my teeth, I don't know unless I have something that can reflect back to me how I'm showing up, right? You can't necessarily feel it, right? And so it's the same thing with the happier, healthier, wealthier, wiser, is what's the equivalent of the spinach in our teeth in each of those areas that we're not able to see without some tools and aids.
Right.
And if I'm going to a networking event and I have spinach in my teeth, it will be distracting. People won't be able to hear me. They're just looking at the spinach in my teeth. And so our saboteurs, back to a point you were making, one of the things they can do is be a distraction as well as a hindrance, depending on the scenario. So truth becomes a pathway to more freedom. Being able to show 360 of ourselves, not just the cutest, prettiest, most presentable parts, but really learning how to embrace all parts, even the parts that are in the dark, because that's a part of you or your experience. And that doesn't mean it can't be transmuted. Doesn't mean that light can't be shined on it. But recognizing what's in the darker parts as well as what may be in the public space or have the light on it, and being able to embrace the whole self, all your experiences, really does become a path to freedom and being fully self-expressed with an open heart and loving fully. It really is the starting place. That's why scripture says, before you start to pull the log out of someone else's eye or the little stick out of someone else's eye, can you get the log out of your own? So that self-awareness is a powerful posture in life. So that's why I love that truth telling is part of this process.
I love it. I love it. So one of the things I know we said we were going to do is we're going to share a link to the saboteur assessment. And again, part of the work I do, it's one of the certifications I have. So I'm a certified success coach with Success Magazine. I'm a certified transformational coach with Debrina. And but one of the things we do, it's with positive intelligence. And so there's a link here. You can type in bit.ly and it's know yours _ living powerfully. Or you can go to positiveintelligence.com and you can go down and you'll see this little orange guy, right? This judge. And you click on a link that says discover your saboteur. So there's a free link. It takes about 5 minutes to do. And when you type this in and you go through this process, you really want to go through really quickly, but it allows us to identify a little bit of truth, things that maybe you're like, oh, okay, I see. I see. So when I did it, my top 3 saboteurs were, and they have names and they're cute. They have little images and they're actually funny. You're not in trouble because you have saboteurs. We all have saboteurs. If you have a brain and you have lived a human experience, then we all have saboteurs. So mine were controller. Anyone who knows me is probably like, yeah, I could see that. Just a bit, right? Hyperachiever, like I'm doing a lot. I do a lot quickly. I probably drive people in a space where they're like, I'm not doing all of that, right? So my being a hyperachiever could have negative influence on other people around me. They're like, I'm not trying to do all that work. I love that you're doing it, but don't pull me into it, right? So it's not even just about being truthful to ourselves, but how do we influence other people? So that's one thing. And then my third saboteur was like kind of combination of pleaser and avoider, right? Wanting to support people and help others, but also wanting to avoid negative things. So I kind of have to work on four of those things. And so, Debrina, this concept of this tool, saboteur assessment, why is it important that we have tools like the saboteur assessment to help us see ourselves and how we influence others and, you know, those around us?
Well, I also took the assessment, and it does only take a few minutes. And and it's out of 10. So that's really cool too, because you can see on that scale of 10 for each of the saboteurs where you might land. So there was a few of those that I was beyond the 50% mark, or beyond 5 if it's out of 10, slightly below the 50% mark. Mine was hyperachiever, controller, and stickler. And one of the things that's so powerful, I think, about this particular assessment is it helps us become aware of what could be tripwires or handicaps in interacting with others. And a lot of times we might know our own personality style or our own likes and dislikes, but we may not be aware of, in the presence and company of others and in our interactions and relationships with others and all the spaces that interactions are required in our lives, how do we tend to show up and what things to be mindful of so it supports the interaction and doesn't interfere with the interaction. And so that's what I found really useful to be mindful of, because there's also positive effect of each of the saboteurs, but we're not talking about the positive effect. It's already doing its good thing. It's let's not be tripped up by the aspects of this that may not bode well or work well in the way you're showing up as you interact with other people. So that's what I think is also really awesome. And it breaks it down to what are the characteristics, what might tend to be the thought pattern, what might be some of the falsehoods you're telling yourself in terms of the negative expression of that saboteur, what impact might it be having on others that you're not aware of, and how might it even be tied to your own survival strategy. And so, so it isn't just revealing your potential saboteurs or your tendencies, but it's also giving you those subcategories so you can do further self-evaluation and know where you need to pull back a bit, make an adjustment a bit. When you're in the midst of that aspect of that saboteur showing up, like, I was about to kick in that familiar way. Let me put some reins on it. So I recommend everybody do the saboteur assessment.
Wait a minute. Sorry, go ahead. Say that again.
It's great for self-awareness.
Right.
Spinach in your teeth.
So wait a minute, Debrina. I heard you say when those things show, so this is like the truth telling. So the question we were just talking about was, why is it so important that we tell the truth and use tools like this? Saboteur assessment is one of the many things, right? You can do 360s, you all kind of stuff that you could do. But this is one of the ones I like because it gets right to it. Like it's right to, like you said, how do you influence? How might it impact your performance, your own personal well-being, your stress levels? That's like, this, we say get healthier and happier. When you read how your saboteurs might show up for you, right? As a stickler who's, cutting the grass with the magnifying glass and a pair of scissors, right? You're down there. It's like, is that really necessary? So you get to kind of pause yourself in these moments where you might be, I'll say, less than optimal performing in a way that might be causing you unnecessary stress, that might be influencing others differently. So I love that. So you just said it helps you to see it. And what we call this is sometimes just the truth will set you free, will make you free, right? So it's this concept of you see it and you get to pause it. We call this intercepting the saboteurs with positive intelligence, right? It's the pause. It is the breathing. When you see it, you get to say, oh, yes. I would have normally wasted so much time with these saboteurs. Can you say how much time we waste, Debrina, with these saboteurs? Absolutely. So I would have wasted time. Let's talk about that.
Environment.
Sorry, go ahead. Let's talk about that. Like the ways
and lose relationships.
Say it one more time. Sorry.
You can lose time, lose money, and lose relationships and health, depending on how long the patterns have been going on.
Right. And so when you see it, people may not believe that just seeing it and being able to pause, that's enough for you to be able to decide. Then decisions determine your destiny. So you get to decide, do I want to really go down that path right now? Or do I know that it's not going to lead me where I want to go? Debrina, talk about that as a transformational coach. It is in those limiting beliefs, the things that those saboteurs used to tell us. You're like, no, I choose not to believe that and not to go down that path. Talk to someone right now, Debrina, about what they can do differently in the moment, that step that they can take once they see themselves truthfully, once they have some clarity about where it might be taking them off path. Talk a little bit about what we can do when we see it, how we can pause and shift to doing something different, to activating differently.
Yeah, well, what's so powerful is if you don't know how you're showing up and you aren't aware that you are activating some of the negative tendencies of your saboteurs, then you're unaware. You don't know what you don't know. So now, instead of a double don't know, you now do know. You have a baseline. You have something against which to make a different choice. You have something against which to notice the familiar pattern versus there are other options for me, or there that is showing up and I now can name it because I have language for it and I have an awareness of its presence. So just being aware is such a powerful jump off point, because as you mentioned, your awareness gives you contrast. I have some other options now. I don't have to do the familiar. There's that thing showing up. Let me pause. And it's going forward and to the left. I'm going to go forward and to the right this time and try some different ways of showing up and interacting and engaging. So it really is the beginning of up leveling, is to become aware of how you're showing up, to be truthful in looking in the mirror and being able to not judge the metaphoric spinach in your teeth. Don't say they're bad, say, there's spinach in my teeth. So we don't have to kick into negative labeling when we become aware of things. It's like, it's a snapshot. It is giving me feedback. And we don't have to move into beating ourselves up. But we can move into shifting our attention instead of however we were directing our attention previously. Maybe you gave that example, I love it, of cutting the grass with the magnifying glass and a pair of, micro scissors. It's like, okay, let me shift my attention to a slightly bigger purview versus each blade of grass. So yes, these are square ones for all of us. Awareness, being truthful, and this assessment really helps you to see how you're showing up, so you can then go forward making different decisions and then the choices that come out of those decisions. And yes, there's deeper healing work involved, because this also talks about thought patterns and beliefs, which are take some additional muscles to really clear and clean out the causative stuff. But just being more aware gives you lots of ammo to begin making different decisions.
I love it. So we talked about taking this information and then turning it into an activation. I like to say move beyond courageous conversations to intentional activation. So also you talked about having a plan. Like once you see them and you're like, okay, I know what would normally happen. I'm about to have a meeting. I'm a bit of a controller and a hyperachiever. I'm going to be with some people that might have different saboteurs. So I'm going to plan ahead, right? I'm going to lay out this is going to be a different plan of action. And then here's some other things. Here's some options that I'm going to take when dealing with someone that maybe be totally opposite than me, but I can see, okay, now I understand their saboteurs as well, right? So being able to share them in community is also powerful. So as we talk about, we're going to talk about two things as we close, but this concept of information to activation, right? Like that's critical. You just talked about knowing is half the battle, right? We talk about AAA, right? Awareness, action, and accountability. So it's the awareness that allows you to take new actions, and the accountability is something that we hopefully can hold ourselves accountable. But Sabrina, we talked about it before. You can want a thing and not really be ready to do something different. So let's go back. Let's circle back to where we started the last session. You can want to be different. I know people who I love and adore who said, I want to do differently. We're in the middle of the thing that they said they wanted. Now it's hard to say for someone to say, I want to lose weight, and then they're about to pick up a cookie and you're like, that has to be from inside. Because who are we to tell someone which cookie they should eat or which one they shouldn't? But like this concept of saying, connecting with someone and perhaps asking about the opportunity. Are you really ready to do something different? Like, do you want it, or are you really ready to take different actions? Talk about that real quick.
We have to remember, this piece about the saboteurs talks about the survival factor. I call it your survival strategy, your strategy for making it through life. So there's a payoff to however you've been showing up and doing things. Now, the negative consequence may not yet have exceeded whatever the payoff is. And that is why we can stay in things and say, I want something different, but we haven't kicked into readiness, where you're like, hold up, the payoff, I'm ready to relinquish the payoff for an even greater one. If I heal this, if I address this, if I acknowledge this. And so it's not, the payoff doesn't matter, but what if the payoff, the benefit, the reward, the gain is even greater than the piece we're hanging on to out of fear? So for example, one of the other great things about this is you can begin with the opposite. So for example, let's say you mentioned being an avoider, right? And a lot of, especially women, I've noticed, because I do a lot of transformational work with women, that one of the ways we avoid is we stifle and silence our voices. And so in my cohorts, one of the guidelines for how we engage is that you have a commitment, even in being here in this course with Sabrina Jackson Gandy, that one, your voice matters in the space. Your thoughts matter being brought forth with your voice. And you don't get to be on the bleachers watching other people. You get to get on the field. So what would the opposite be for an avoider that normally is observing but not sharing, listening but not contributing to what's being verbally shared? Here's what the opposite would look like. Sabrina says, who would like to share, or who has a question? And I force my hand up, right? Force it up, because my inclination, right, is to just sit here and participate in only one dimension of the experience, which is the listening side. And so we don't have to, go get too profound and heavy. Oftentimes the opposite is what, like, if you're always talking, what's the opposite? Let me now learn how to listen well, right? So often the opposite becomes the pathway to help us begin to break the grip of the old behaviors and patterns that those saboteurs have formed for us. So, we don't want people to overthink it. Where do I begin? Okay, do the opposite. I tend to okay, now let's work on listening well. I tend to silence my voice. Okay, let's work on bringing your voice forward, right? I tend to procrastinate. So today I'm going to take a half a baby step instead of spinning in my mind. So the opposite can help us begin the forward movement as well.
I love it. And I love that we have talked about, as it relates to being a transformational coach, it's the work I love to do as well. And I know we talk about limiting beliefs, those things that actually we truly believe. And when we think about limiting beliefs and turning those into powerful beliefs, right? Those empowering beliefs. It's the opposite. It's just the opposite. You don't, like you said, you don't have to complicate it, right? A limiting belief says, you know what, I'm if I'm a hyperachiever, I gotta get another certification in order for people to want to pay for my work. I am over certified. I am over. Stop. Like really. Like just show up in community, and the right people who want to do the next level of work will show up, and they'll be willing to do right. So for me, like I've had some thoughts in my head that aren't true. We all have. And so it's the opposite. I got to do another thing. I don't have to do another thing. I just need to show up and do what I do. Right. And so I think that is important too. How do you change the status quo for yourself? How do
Yeah.
you turn information into activation? It's doing the opposite of what you know that saboteur would have been telling you to do, or you would have done just out of habit.
Yeah. And then what's also so wonderful about the series, and I'm really glad you've designed it this way, is you also are going to be talking about healing. Because if we have beliefs which serve as our personal software, right?
Yes.
Software is what gives a computer its instructions. Our personal software is reflected in our beliefs. So you can't just say, I now believe something different, when that belief has been operating in me for, let's say, 30 years.
Right.
And so it isn't just a statement, and it isn't just a decision. There is some excavation to unhinge and unhook that thing that has barbs on it that needs to be extracted. And there's a process for that. And part of the process includes healing work, where you're now going into your interior and into your spirit, to your psyche, your emotions, and you begin to unhinge these beliefs that have kind of locked on to parts of our thinking and our emotional system. So we know that there's deeper work to do. This is not just make a new decision. We know that, but if we're really looking for the complete and fuller transformation, which always leads to more liberation and self-expression and deep joy, then the pieces that are also part of this 6 weeks need to be part of it. The healing work,
yes,
in the form of forgiveness and the other forms that healing can take. So I'm really excited that was factored into the design, because so often that's left out. And then we just have improvement. We don't have deep and lasting change, aka transformation. We have a change in behavior, which can be temporal or circumstantial, but we don't have a deep change in the core concept of the person or the software that's powering their lives, really.
Yes, I love it. I love it.
That's a part of it. Yes.
I'm so glad you mentioned that. So as we close, because we're gonna talk about next steps, we talked about this concept of turning this information into activation, to doing things differently, and you mentioned this concept of forgiveness work. Healing, empowerment, and healing are connected, right? Because we're not saying we don't want short-term empowerment. We want long-term transformation, right? That's where the healing comes in. So is there anything you want to share to prepare people? So we have week 1 was about really creating a space for people to understand that their ability to change is within them, right? It's really this concept of we have the power to change. Week 2 is really going deeper into what might be holding you back. We're going to go deeper into the saboteurs. Week 3, we're going to talk about the saboteurs and the sage, like being able to tap into those sage superpowers. And then in week 4, what's left when you're trying to get better, happier, healthier, and wiser, and you still have some things that are stuck. There's some forgiveness work that is required for some of that deeper transformation. So is there anything you want to say to prepare people for the next layers of the work?
Yeah. Well, if it's transformation work, then we have to include healing work. And by transformation, I mean caterpillar to butterfly. Personal improvement is the caterpillar moves to a higher branch, or it inches along further on the same branch it's on. So if we're talking about transformation, it's a new creature. And that means that the self-concept and the pillars of the self-concept that inform how you show up, how you perceive, how you relate, engage, communicate, those have begun to be replaced at a deep and lasting level. So how do you do that? Well, we have to look at what are those beliefs. We've got to look at the thoughts that arise from those beliefs. We've got to look at the experiences that are surrounding when those beliefs even got installed, and the emotions that have followed in the wake of the experiences that often installed those beliefs in the first place, because emotions need to be transmuted or released. And otherwise, they stay in your system, especially low level emotions. If they keep accumulating and building up and they're not either released or transmuted, they can create health challenges. Dis-ease can begin to manifest in your body. We are the sickest industrialized country. We have such an accumulation of low level negative emotion in our systems that it makes us the sickest country, even though we have technology and wealth and all these things. So the implications are huge, but healing is what allows you to now do the interior work and clean out the gunk, funk, and junk, emotionally, funky beliefs, hindering thoughts, limiting, disabling, debilitating thoughts and beliefs. So it's the deeper work that really unclogs you, as we were saying in the first week of this awesome panel. Unclogs you, allows more flow, your magnetism increases, your natural resonance with positive opportunity and people. There's certain things that naturally occur when you unclog and you do that deeper healing work. Not to mention your heart is reopened or opened wider. And that's the most potent and powerful force in the universe. So yes, so glad that healing is part of this. It is crucial if you're doing transformational work.
I love it. I love it. So I know we have an Eventbrite. You guys can come back to this live, and we're going to post it here in the chat for you to join us. In the Eventbrite, you can join all 6 or all 5 in the next 5 sessions. So Debrina will continue to bring her voice as a part of this process. She'll be back live in this room with us on June 3rd as we go deeper with the forgiveness work. She's going to join us each week with the standard questions and bringing her insights. And if you have any specific questions for her, we're going to continue to offer some coaching, etc. So feel free to put it in the chat, and we're going to be monitoring each and every element of this process for sure. And I just want to say thank you all for joining us. This is, again, the Getting Better Together, the Living Powerfully experience. We're all about getting healthier, happier, wealthier, and wiser. And Debrina Jackson-Gandy, do you have any final words that you want to share with people about why they should join us?
Well, I think we covered it, but I think most importantly, we're working some new muscles here. And if you go to the gym and you do one workout one time, you are not going to have a 6-pack. You're not going to have your biceps and triceps, beautifully defined, right? So the same way as gardening, the same way as going to the gym for our physical bodies, you have got to have staying power. You have got to have commitment, and you've got to be willing to put forth the energy and the effort and work the muscles over the weeks of this series. So just remember that patience, persistence, diligence, commitment, and the fruit will come. But you got to invest the energy and the effort and the commitment and have the will.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're wonderful. This is just incredible. Thank you.
Appreciate you.